Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Ross. I'm currently, or in a week from now, I'll start in a new position. I'm a process improvement analyst with Virginia. I'm going to start with the Department of Health. But for the past 14 years, I've been in IT with the Department of Corrections, and so we have kind of a little case study today from them. For the last 5 years, I've been the Kanban coach internally at Department of Corrections. I also am the founder of a local interest group in Richmond called Capital Kanban. We meet about quarterly or so and have speakers come in. And this is kind of an unusual thing. I'm a dialogue skills trainer and coach. We won't get into that, but ask me if you're interested in that. That's a very interesting aspect of my job. I'm also a lean facilitator, and that's my new job that I'm stepping into. But I did the 20-day lean facilitator certification program over here in Baltimore that the Maryland World Class Consortia offered. So it's a very extensive, like 5-month, 20 days over 5-month period of time, talking about lean thinking and lean process improvement. So my Twitter account is kanbanquiqui. Feel free to tweet if you would like. We're going to jump right into an example. So because I'm in IT and I also have done lean process improvement, when I came back from my training, I kind of automatically started using both of those in all of my work. And some pretty amazing things started to happen. And that's what I really wanted to share with you today was, where this lean thinking and process improvement really intersects with IT. So one of the first things that I used it on was this process, GTL. So this is a prison that I worked with, right? And in prisons, they have telephones specifically for prisoners. And we have a vendor, and they do things like they limit the number of people that you're allowed to call as an offender, the number of people you're allowed to call. They will tape record their phone calls and screen them, things like that. So they came to me and they said, we want you to help us with a problem. All we want you to do is send this file to this external vendor. Really simple little thing. So I said, okay, well that's really interesting, that's easy, but let's take a look at actually what you guys are actually doing end to end. And so we did, and I'll tell you about it. I couldn't really share the process maps with that, but I'll tell you about it. So what they were doing was, what we discovered was that in the prison, when they would intake, say, 40 offenders into a prison, they would write all of them on a piece of paper, all 40 names, and they would fax that up to headquarters. And then headquarters would go to their fax machine, they would take this list of 40 people, and they would go to this GTL system, and they would enter them into the system, thereby creating a new account. Now the system they would ask it to generate a PIN number. And the PIN number is going to be this person's offender ID that DOC assigned to them, plus this randomly generated number. They would take that randomly generated number and they would write it on the list of all 40 people. Furthermore, they would take an additional sheet of paper that was specific for that offender they would type their name in and they would put this random number on this piece of paper. Then they would fax back 41 sheets of paper, one for each offender, and then the master list. So this is what we discovered when we stepped back and took a look. So I'm not going to tell you where all this ended because I want to kind of use this to kind of seed throughout this entire presentation. Oops. Okay, so you might be saying, well, this is very interesting, you're doing this process improvement, but how does this relate to IT? So what I will say is that this is extremely relevant to IT because what it does is it, by using both of these methodologies, it reduces the complexity of the computer systems that we are going to be delivering. And it also, because what we're doing is we're standardizing work before we automate it. It makes our work, because it's less complex, it means that we're lowering our costs, right? Because simpler work it costs less. We're going to deliver faster because ideally there's going to be a lot of things that we're not going to have to automate. So this is that Agile manifesto, maximize the amount of work that you don't do. Systems are going to be easier to maintain because they're not very complex. We're going to have better customer adoption. So how many times have you developed that beautiful system and rolled it out to the users and they love it, and then 6 months later you find out that, yeah, they're using it, but they've bastardized it to basically look like the system they used to have. And so they're really losing a lot of the functionality that we've built in, and then sometimes it ends up as a very bad story. So adoption is enabled because our customer base, our frontline people are involved in the new solution. Coco Chanel, I love this quote by her, "Simplicity is the keynote of all true elegance." So what we're really looking for here is an elegant solution. So when IT gets involved, what we do is we build something, and it's basically a set of requirements, right? But once we build it, we harden that process. Actually, we set it in stone. And so here, the form is basically takes the shape of our requirements. But it is set in stone. Now, we can still change our IT systems if our processes change. But it takes a lot longer, and it costs a lot more money. So we reduce our optionality. Is that what he said? So because of that, what we want to do, I am submitting, is that we want to kind of tune our systems before we set them in stone. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that what I'm really talking about here, I'm not so much talking about going in and tuning up what our IT department is doing. I'm talking about tuning up the business, our core business areas, before we go into our automation. And I basically am presupposing that every process that comes to us is filled with Muda, or waste. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that Japanese word of Muda. And I can say that with a lot of certainty, that the processes that are brought to us are filled with waste. Just like I can say a garden that is not weeded is going to have a lot of weeds, because that's what kind of organically happens to our processes. They absolutely, left unattended, will be filled with waste. David knew that. David Anderson knew that, and that's why he included the feedback loop and also improve incrementally, evolve experimentally. He knew that, so he built something in to take care of that. Okay. Why do processes degrade? Well, there's lots of reasons why they degrade, but a couple of them are number one, most of the time, they kind of grew organically. We didn't sit down at the drawing board and develop this process from a systems thinking kind of perspective. So an example might be where the CEO comes in and says, you know, we have been using rental cars, and now I think we've grown to the point of we're gonna have our own fleet. And so, hey guys, go make it happen. So we'll need a maintenance department, and the finance department's going to be involved. You guys go out and figure it out. So each silo basically figures out what they need to do, and we get it done. We hammer it out. But we didn't sit down at the drawing board with a value stream and map this thing out beginning to end. Very rarely does that ever happen. So that's kind of, we're starting out from that perspective. And then time passes, and all kinds of things happen in time. So our ecosystem can change, right? The world is changing all the time. So there's new innovations like cell phones or GPS or what are the little things that fly now in the air? What are they called? The drones. Yeah, drones came along. So all sorts of things are happening, but how often do we then go back and say, wow, this new innovation's available, how does that impact our process? Very rarely do we ever actually do that. We don't even actually, for the most part, have a mechanism for going back and doing that. Because we're, by and large, working within our silo, we might, within our silo, make some improvements. But systems thinking will tell us that sometimes you can improve a silo or a piece of a process and actually make the end-to-end less efficient by doing that. So I just submit that processes left unattended tend to rot or degrade. So that's what kind of gets brought to us until somebody in our customer, our core business, reaches this pain point. And that's when they are ready to approach their IT department. And so they come to us. So this is like a real opportunity at this point for us to help them in a multitude of ways. Technology is certainly a very powerful lever that we have, but we have some other things that we can do too that don't cost as much, might be quicker to implement, and might just kind of make sense. So what we're talking about is lean. And so what is lean really? Really at its base. What lean means is, very simply, maximize customer value by reducing waste, reducing or eliminating waste. Operationally, what lean looks like in an organization is it's a set of tools, which we're going to look at some of the tools today. But I think more importantly is strategically or culturally what lean looks like. And what lean looks like is a spirit of continuous improvement. It's everybody, every day, improving in every way, or systematically solving problems. Everybody, every day. When I first heard this, it blew me away. I thought, you know, what if we actually did this at work? If everybody, every day, looked at ways of improving how we do our work, where would we be? So that's what it is. It's a culture. So lean has, you know, of course, it started out in manufacturing, but it's now in construction and really big in healthcare. And where my interest lies is in lean government. 36 states have a mandate, an executive order, thou shalt be lean. A lot of grants, what they're finding now is that they can't even get grants without doing lean. That's built into the grant money. All right. So we can't really go very far in our conversation talking about lean without really defining what we mean by a value stream. So a value stream is basically a product line or a service that an organization will deliver. So in our example here, we've got, product 1, and it crosses through the procurement, the warehousing, manufacturing, and the shipping silos. Product 2 is only going to cross through the manufacturing and shipping silo. So you kind of get the point that a value stream is really on the is horizontal rather than vertical. Our organizations, though, are kind of organized vertically. So it makes sense that we really haven't looked at things from this perspective. In a lean organization, you will find that they have a position called a value stream manager. And the value stream manager is going to manage that product across its whole value stream. So in value stream, in my new job, where I'm going to be working at the Department of Health, just to kind of give you some examples of what some value streams might look like. So one of their value streams is going to be licensing physicians. Another one is going to be birth certificates. And another one's going to be like just employee onboarding. Almost all of us have that value stream. So that's what a value stream is, and I think, honestly, if there was one thing that made lean so powerful, it's the fact that it crosses over the silos. Very few things cross over the silos. And that's where it's at those silo walls, that's where the majority of the waste is. And speaking of waste, we have 8 forms of waste. And what I want to do is just kind of talk about some of the forms of waste in my example, the GTL example. So one of the forms of waste that we found in the GTL example was defects. A lot of the offenders would forget their PIN number because it was assigned. And how many of us can remember PIN numbers, right? And they're in a low-trust organization, so it's not like they're going to keep a notebook with all their pins. They get stolen. So they had to remember it. So we had to do a lot of rework with the pins. They would call in, and we'd have to reassign them. So that was one of the forms of waste. How about overproduction? This master list with the 40 offenders that I was talking about, it's basically everybody who came into the institution that day. We would send it back to the institution, and they would file it. When I asked them, what do you do with that? They said, we have it here just in case. So that's kind of an overproduction thing, an example of overproduction. We had waiting because our offenders had to wait sometimes up to a couple days before they would have access to the telephone. And just to bring it down to like the real human being element, people who are in a prison, it's a pretty scary transition going into a prison. And you want to be able to connect with the people that, your family. And so they would want to make a phone call. And sometimes they'd have to wait 2 days to do that. Their families wouldn't even know where they were. And so there's definitely some waiting in there. There was also this batch, right? The batch of the 40 offenders that got sent up there. So that batch was waiting. Transportation. So all this moving the data around, this information around, the faxing, that's actually transportation because the data was moving from one place to another. So there was lots of transportation in here. And transportation is normally a real heavy hitter. And then probably the most insidious and pervasive one is lack of respect for employees. Or not really utilizing, so the frontline worker is the person who knows the most about what they're doing. And they're often not the ones who get input or are able to make the decisions. And so that is like not respecting the value that they bring. And the end consequence to that is that people have that little switch that they go, okay, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to stop talking. In fact, I'll probably even stop thinking. You tell me what to do, and I will blindly follow. So all this untapped resource out there that we are just disregarding, that's huge waste right there. So I like to think of leaning out a process as kind of chiseling out the value that lies within. So what we're doing is basically chiseling away all of the waste to reveal this core thing that is of value, and that's our core process. That is the value add. So, lean tools. There's quite a lot of lean tools, but they're not really very complicated by and large. Again, everything comes from the systems level approach, just like in Kanban. Actually, I wanted to do a little experiment with you guys. As I'm talking about lean and looking at some of these tools, I want you to kind of just in your rear processor be thinking about how did these influence Kanban, or where do you see them showing up in Kanban? Because we are at the Lean Kanban conference, and lean was really part of the underpinnings of Kanban. So you should see it kind of showing up. Let's see. So another reason why I think it's important just to talk about why are we even proposing that we kind of take this outside of the silo of the IT world. Well, Taiichi Ohno was the father of the Toyota production system. And as you know, the Toyota production system became the basis for lean. Taiichi Ohno really honed the Toyota production system so that they were really able to produce at a very high rate of efficiency. But what they found was that it was their upstream that started to become what slowed them down. So they actually went to their upstream vendors, suppliers, and they helped them to lean out. So this is kind of like that. We're in IT, we're using Kanban, boy, we're really humming. Now it's our upstream that we need to start to look at. So managing to see, again, the systems level approach. So imagine if you're, caught in traffic. This is kind of what it's like to be a worker, in a very underperforming team. You're caught in this. It's not moving very quickly. You don't know why, because you can't see anything except all the cars around you. Now, take it up to the helicopter, the traffic helicopter view. So now you have a bird's eye view of your process. And once you get to that level, the answers start to just kind of pop out at you. They're so obvious that you can't help but see them. So that's what we do, is we pop it up to that bird's eye view. And this is how we do that. We use a value stream map. So we're in IT, looks a lot like a process map. There's some things that are different about this. So it is a process map in that we're going to do every step of the, we're going to document every step that's required in order to deliver value. But we're going to take actually a deeper dive as well. We're going to go to Gemba, or go to where the work is happening. So we have an idea of what the process is, but when you actually walk the Gemba floor, you start to see that we really don't know. When I first started this project with GTL, they said to me, well, we're the vendor, and we know that there's a lot of work required to do this telephone system, but we carry the lion's share of that work. We don't want to burden the Department of Corrections. So we do really most of the work. You'll find out later how that worked out. And they meant that. They really, from their perspective, that's what they really thought. what I did was I went and actually walked the steps. I went to a prison. As people were coming in, I had a timer. I timed it. So I knew exactly how long each one of the steps took. And I also knew that we have about 10,000 offenders annually, so I could extrapolate out how many man hours or person hours we were using to, we were devoting to this delivery stream or this value stream. So in the value stream map, we're going to clock exactly how long does each step take. So it might take, 45 seconds to fill out a form. But how long does it take for that form to get from my desk to the next desk? Well, that might take 2 days. So I'm going to note how long the value added time is, as well as how long the clock time is, or the cycle time. We're going to note the number of defects. So you physically, at each step, you look at what is the percentage of correct and complete deliverable that you were delivered. We're going to look at the stack of papers that they have there, and we're going to look through them and figure out what is that percentage. In that way, we can locate, or we can hone in on where are the defects being created. We're going to count inventory. How many pieces of paper do you have? And what I learned from Frank Vega is that you only need a real small sampling to really get an idea of what your metrics are. So here's what, in this example, what we discovered was that, well, let me back up. So this value stream is doing a business loan approval. And in this value stream, it takes, if you were doing single piece flow, it would take 1 hour and 45 minutes. But what it's actually taking is 24 days. And so we have a very low efficiency rate here. The 1 hour and 45 minutes becomes our target. We probably will never achieve that, but that becomes, in Lean, what we're doing is striving for perfection. We're always trying to get closer and closer. In this case, that would be perfection based on what we know now. So that becomes our target. Okay, so now that we have all this information, we actually know what's happening on the floor, and we actually have the statistics. We have a really solid understanding of what our current state is. Now we're going to go on a treasure hunt, and we're going to look for those 8 forms of waste. And so the other thing we're going to do is we're looking for trouble. We're actually looking for trouble. So in many organizations, the idea of problems, finding problems, is a little underappreciated. I know that there are organizations where you can't even really use the word problem without kind of getting in trouble. So what happens is people kind of shuffle problems, under the desk. Well, Taichi Ono kind of turned that on its ear with something that's become to know as the Ono circle. So what he would do is he would go out to the shop floor, he would draw a circle on the floor and have the manager come over, the manager of that area, come over, stand in that circle, and he would say, now what do you see? And if the manager said, everything is running great, I don't see any problems. Taichi Ono said, no problem is a problem. We need to be able to see problem. We need to train our eye to see problems. Because if we can't really see the problems, there's no way we can solve them, right? So this is a real culture shift. Okay, now that we've got our problems all defined, we kind of know where we are, now we can sit down at the drawing table and design a new future state. Now, we don't have to go out and fully implement the future state, but at least we have a design of what it might look like. Honestly, sometimes in Lean, it is a little bit of a They call it a kaikaku, or a radical change. I prefer David Anderson's approach, which is evolutionary incremental change. So, and that is possible as well. But at least we have a map to follow. And that is our future state. The cool thing about this future state is that it then becomes our new current state. And when we're onboarding employees, we can say, look, see, that's you right there. This is what you fit into. So now, our new employees, we all have an understanding of the broader picture that we fit into. What is the value proposition that we're really tapping into and contributing to? Helps us to become engaged. Also, having this, it's very nice to be able to just go to this. So when the ecosystem does change, we now have this we can go right to, and we can say, how does this impact us? Another tool is 5 why analysis. I imagine some of you have heard of this. So this is a very simple tool, but Lean tends to want to get at the root of the cause. Let's don't solve the symptom. Let's don't solve for the symptom. Let's actually find the root and pull it up and dig it out. Because if we don't, it will come back in some form or another. So here's a 5 why analysis that I thought was kind of apropos for where we are. We're here in DC. So the problem was the Lincoln and Jefferson monuments in DC are deteriorating. This happened back in the 1990s. So we're going to do our 5 whys. So why is the monument deteriorating? Oh, because harsh chemicals are frequently used to clean the monument. So why are harsh chemicals needed? To clean off the large number of bird droppings on the monument. Why are there a large number of bird droppings on the monument? Because of the large population of spiders that live in and around the monument. They're a good source of food for the birds. Why is there a large population of spiders in and around the monument? Oh, that would be because of the vast swarms of insects on which the spiders feed at dawn inside the monument. Okay, so why are there swarms of insects drawn to the monument at dusk? Because the lighting on the monument in the evening attracts the local insects. We're right on the water here. So the solution to this problem was not to change, the harsh chemicals. Thank you. But to turn the lights on 30 minutes later. Saved us money and electricity. Also, just the problem absolutely disappeared. It absolutely evaporated. A lot of times when we get to that root cause, we can do that with problems. All right, so another concept in Lean is called Poka Yoke. And Poka Yoke means mistake-proofing your process. So if I don't want to forget my cell phone in the morning, I just put it in my shoe. Then I mistake-proof that process of going to work. Here's one interesting one. I think there was actually a case where a physician removed the wrong leg. And so they started this new process of the physician signs their name to the site of the surgery. That's a good one. We want that one. The kind of classic one is that your car won't start unless it's in park. And that was because people started starting their cars and their cars would just take off. So that's an example of Poka Yoke. And an IT example is just a drop down. So that we kind of build those constraints around people and they can't enter a mistake or an invalid. And how much time do I have? Like 10 minutes, okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cover A3 thinking. So A3 thinking is basically a problem-solving methodology. So it's a template, but it's way more than a template. They're actually like A3 thinking conferences, and there's entire books around A3 thinking. So, and A3 thinking came from Toyota, and it's basically a plan, do, a Deming's thing, a plan, do, check, act. But there are steps involved, which are, get some background, understand our current condition or our problem statement really well, what's the goal we're trying to achieve, and what's the root cause analysis. So that's all under the kind of plan area. And then the do area is let's develop countermeasures or things that we will do that will get us from our current state to our goal. What's our action plan? And then our check is to validate our assumptions, because it is all very much about the scientific method, right? Where we make a hypothesis. If I do this, I expect this to happen, but I won't really know until I try it. So that's built into this plan. Kind of, helps us with that safe to fail kind of culture, knowing that, that's built into the plan. And then there's the act stage, which is, based on the feedback, or based on my metrics, what am I going to do next? I may loop back through the PDCA again. So this can actually be used at a micro level, so you can use it, to, like, why did that job app end last night? You can run an A3 on that. Or you can run an A3 on your entire project. But it's iterative. So it basically says, based on, this is what I know now, but they're normally done in pencil because I'm going to learn, right? I always think it's so funny that at the very beginning of the project, we're asked, how many resources will you need and how much is this going to cost and when are you going to deliver it? And that's the point at which we know the very least about the project. So we're having to we're having to write it in pen. So A3 says, nope, we expect this to change. Okay, so the GTL example. I'll kind of give you the punchline. So what we did was, what they really wanted was for us to just develop or build a file to send to their organization so they wouldn't have to add offenders into their system anymore. But once we looked at the whole value stream, it became eminently apparent that this whole thing of pins was a problem, and that transportation was a huge part of that. And so once we were able to identify that, we honed in on that. So we said, well, how can we eliminate reduce or eliminate the transportation? Well, we can't. I mean, that's just how it's always been done. Well, after many iterations of looking at it, we discovered that we could do something a little bit different. And that was when we entered the offender into the system, we know what their birthday is, so we assigned them a default PIN number. So now their PIN number became their offender ID and their birthday, birth month and day, which is not something other people around them would know. Then the first time they go onto the telephone, it asks them to reset the PIN to a PIN of their choosing. So it was much easier for them to remember. So what we ended up with, in our value stream map, we learned that this was taking 8,000 person hours annually for us. And remember I told you that the GTL guys said we carry the lion's share of the work? Well, what we actually found out was that they were only doing 1/3 of the work, and Department of Corrections was doing 2/3 of the work. And so so basically, just like with the example of the 5 whys, all this work simply evaporated. 8,000 person hours of work annually. Of course, we added a file in there, but there were a number of components in how we solved the problem for them. So they now have 8,000. All of us have 8,000 person hours that we can reallocate to other more value-adding work. So the experiment. The experiment was, how many of you could relate lean thinking to Kanban?